Please. I will transfer £50,000 to your account right now. Just pretend to be my girlfriend. For 10 days. Please, you have to save me. Gemma stared at the woman desperately clutching the lapels of her soaked, oversized trench coat. Here was Eleanor Vance, heir to the Vance property empire, notoriously ruthless, and currently dripping wet in a dimly lit Soho alleyway. And she was begging Gemma, a sleep-deprived barista making barely above minimum wage, to be her fake girlfriend. Before we dive into exactly how a spilled flat white led to a 10-day contract with London's most elusive billionaire, do me a favor. If you love a good fake dating romance with a twist, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. We post immersive, full-length audio stories like this every single week, and trust me, you won't want to miss how this one ends. Now let's go back to the beginning. Gemma was just trying to get home. Her shift at the cafe had run 2 hours late, her Doc Martens were letting in water, and the rain in central London was relentless. She turned the corner onto Greek Street, head down, rushing toward the tube. She never saw the woman sprinting in the opposite direction until they collided. Gemma went down hard, her lukewarm leftover coffee splashing directly onto a pristine, cream-colored silk blouse. Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. A crisp, aristocratic voice hissed. Gemma looked up, ready to snap back, but the words died in her throat. The woman standing over her was striking. High cheekbones, piercing green eyes, and an aura of panicked authority. It was Eleanor Vance. Gemma recognized her from the cover of the Financial Times that had been sitting on the cafe counter all morning. Behind them, the shout of paparazzi echoed down the street. Eleanor, is it true? Is the board forcing you out? Eleanor's eyes darted wildly. Without thinking, she reached down, grabbed Gemma by the hand, and pulled her into a narrow, shadowed doorway. Quiet, Eleanor whispered, her face inches from Gemma's. Gemma could smell her perfume, something rich, woody, and impossibly expensive, cutting through the smell of damp alleyway. They waited in breathless silence as 3 photographers jogged past, their heavy cameras swinging. Once they were gone, Eleanor let out a shuddering breath and leaned back against the brick wall. Right, Eleanor said, composing herself and looking at the massive coffee stain on her blouse. I suppose I owe you an apology for knocking you over. And you owe me a £2,000 shirt. Gemma scoffed, finding her voice. You ran into me, and frankly, anyone wearing £2,000 worth of silk in a London downpour is asking for it. Eleanor blinked, clearly amused to being spoken to like that. A strange, calculating look washed over her face. She looked at Gemma, at her paint-stained jeans, her unruly curly hair, her defiant expression. What's your name? Eleanor asked. Gemma. Eleanor took a deep breath.
Gemma.
I am in a very desperate situation. My family's board of directors is voting to remove me as CEO in 10 days, claiming my erratic, unstable personal life makes me a liability to the company's traditional investors. My grandmother, the chairwoman, told me if I don't show up to the annual Vance Gala next week with a stable, serious partner, I'm out. Okay, and? Gemma asked, crossing her arms. And Eleanor stepped closer, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. I just caught my so-called serious partner of 2 years cheating on me with my accountant, which is why I was running. Eleanor paused, swallowing her pride. Please. I will transfer £50,000 to your account right now. Just pretend to be my girlfriend. For 10 days. You have to save me. 2 days later, Gemma found herself sitting in the passenger seat of a sleek black Range Rover, watching the rolling green hills of the Cotswolds fly by. So, let's review. Eleanor said from the driver's seat, her hands effortlessly steering the massive car. She looked perfectly composed today, wearing a tailored navy blazer and a crisp white shirt. We met at an art gallery in Mayfair, Gemma recited, reading from a thick leather-bound dossier Eleanor had handed her. I'm an independent graphic designer. We've been quietly dating for 6 months to protect my privacy. You love my refreshing honesty and grounding presence. Eleanor smirked slightly. You sound like you're reading a ransom note, Gemma. Try to sound a bit more affectionate. My grandmother, Beatrice, has eyes like a hawk. It's hard to sound affectionate when you handed me a legally binding NDA before saying good morning, Gemma muttered. The Rover crunched onto a long gravel driveway, pulling up to a sprawling, centuries-old manor house made of honey-colored stone. The weekend was grueling. Beatrice Vance was a terrifying matriarch who communicated entirely in veiled insults and sharp glares. Over a tense dinner of roast pheasant, Beatrice grilled Gemma. "So, Gemma," Beatrice drawled, sipping her claret. "Eleanor has never brought a woman home before. She usually prefers her work to human connection. What makes you so special?" Gemma felt the weight of the dining room bearing down on her. She glanced at Eleanor, who looked rigidly tense, her jaw clenched. "She listens," Gemma said quietly. The room went still. Everyone looks at Eleanor and sees an empire. A boss. A headline. But when it's just us, she's surprisingly gentle. She works too hard, she forgets to drink water, and she has a terrible habit of pacing when she's stressed. "I don't care about the company, Mrs. Vance. I just care about her." Under the heavy mahogany table, Eleanor's hand found Gemma's. Her fingers intertwined with Gemma's, gripping tightly. It was supposed to be a performance, but the warmth radiating from Eleanor's palm made Gemma's heart skip a very real beat. By day 7, the lines of the contract had hopelessly blurred. They were sharing the master suite to keep up appearances. Gemma had learned that Eleanor was a restless sleeper who mumbled about spreadsheets. Eleanor had learned that Gemma hummed off-key when she brushed her teeth. One evening, after a particularly brutal afternoon of fending off nosy board members at a garden party, they retreated to Eleanor's private study. Eleanor collapsed onto the velvet sofa, kicking off her heels and burying her face in her hands. Gemma walked over and gently pushed Eleanor's hands away. Without a word, she sat beside her and started massaging the tight knots at the base of Eleanor's neck. Eleanor let out a long, heavy sigh, leaning into the touch. "You're too good at this, Gemma." Beatrice is entirely convinced. "Half the board is eating out of the palm of your hand." "Maybe I just like seeing them squirm," Gemma joked softly. Eleanor turned her head, looking at Gemma. The distance between them was suddenly very small. The study was quiet, lit only by the amber glow of a desk lamp. "Is it all an act?" Eleanor whispered, her green eyes searching Gemma's face. Gemma's breath hitched. "It's supposed to be." Eleanor reached up, her thumb gently tracing the line of Gemma's jaw. "I don't think I want to be anymore." When Eleanor kissed her, there were no cameras, no board members, and no Beatrice watching. It was slow, tentative, and fiercely real. For the first time in her life, Eleanor Vance wasn't calculating her next move. She was just letting herself fall. Day 10. The Vance Annual Gala. Gemma stood in front of a gilded mirror, adjusting the emerald green silk gown Eleanor had bought for her. Tonight was the final night. The board vote was happening in the East Wing at midnight. After that, her contract was up. The £50,000 was already sitting in her bank account. She walked down the grand staircase and found Eleanor waiting at the bottom, looking breathtaking in a tailored black velvet tuxedo. But Eleanor's eyes were shadowed with anxiety. "You look beautiful," Eleanor said, offering her arm. The night was a whirlwind of champagne, forced smiles, and flashing cameras. But as midnight approached, a tall, sharp-looking woman with perfectly coiffed blonde hair intercepted them. It was Pippa, the ex-girlfriend. Well, Pippa sneered, looking Gemma up and down. "The little hired help cleans up nicely." Eleanor stepped in front of Gemma, her voice dropping to a glacial tone. "Walk away, Pippa." "Oh, please, Elle," Pippa laughed. "Did you really think I didn't know? I saw the wire transfer to her account. 50 grand. Does the board know you paid an actress to trick them?" Before Eleanor could speak, Gemma stepped forward. She didn't look angry. She just looked incredibly calm. "She paid me because she was desperate to protect her family's legacy from vultures like you," Gemma said, her voice carrying just enough to turn a few heads. "But she doesn't have to pay me to love her. That part won't do for free." Gemma turned to Eleanor, took her face in her hands, and kissed her, deeply, passionately, right in the middle of the ballroom. When they pulled apart, the entire room was staring, including Beatrice Vance, who was standing by the entrance to the East Wing, tapping her cane. "Well," Beatrice announced loudly, breaking the silence. "If that's the hired help, we should put her on the payroll permanently. Eleanor, the board has voted. Your position is secure. Now, get this circus out of my ballroom." The rain had finally stopped in London. Gemma was packing her small duffel bag in the guest room of Eleanor's townhouse. The 10 days were up. The job was done. She zipped the bag, feeling an aching hollow in her chest. She turned to leave, only to find Eleanor blocking the doorway. "Where are you going?" Eleanor asked, leaning against the frame. "The contract is over, Eleanor. You won. You kept your company." Eleanor stepped into the room, pulling a folded piece of paper from her pocket. It was the original NDA and fake dating contract. Without breaking eye contact with Gemma, Eleanor ripped it perfectly in half, and then in half again, letting the pieces fall to the floor. "I don't care about the company today," Eleanor said softly, walking until she was inches from Gemma. "I care that the only person who has ever seen the real me is currently packing her bags." Gemma looked up, a hopeful smile breaking across her face. "So, no more contracts?" "No contracts," Eleanor promised, wrapping her arms around Gemma's waist. "But I wouldn't mind negotiating a permanent arrangement."